Have you ever heard a sound that chills you to the bone? What would you do if the walls around you seemed to whisper secrets? Can a simple knock on a wall reveal a love story lost in time? What happens when regrets and the past come knocking at your door? Could the echoes of one life linger beyond the wall forever? Join Classic Storytime Hub as we dive into Beyond the Wall by Ambrose Bierce, a reimagined classic story of love, loss, and haunting mystery.
Many years ago, on a journey from Hong Kong to New York, I found myself spending a week in San Francisco. It had been ages since I last walked its streets, and in the time since, my ventures in the Orient had exceeded every expectation. I had grown wealthy, enough to return home, to reconnect with the friends of my youth, those who might still remember me, and remember me kindly. At the top of my list was Mohin Dampier, an old schoolmate whose letters had long stopped arriving, as happens with men separated by distance and duty. Perhaps you've noticed this yourself. The further away a friend drifts, the harder it becomes to send even a single friendly word. I remembered Mohin vividly. Tall, strong, handsome, with a mind more drawn to books than labor. He cared little for the ambitions that obsessed most of the world, including wealth, which, fortunately, his family had provided in abundance. His lineage was old, aristocratic, untouched by commerce, politics, or any conventional glory. It was a family proud of its quiet obscurity. Yet Mohin was more than a gentleman of leisure. Sentimental, yes, but with a fascination for the unknown. He wandered boldly into realms unseen, exploring the strange and the occult, while still anchored to reality by a clear, rational mind. He straddled the line between the ordinary and the uncanny, stepping into the shadows of the unreal without ever abandoning the light of certainty. The night I went to see him was wild. Winter had gripped California, and rain battered the streets relentlessly. Gusts of wind tore through the air, hurling sheets of water against houses with a ferocity that seemed almost alive. My cabman struggled to find the place, tucked far toward the ocean in a lonely, sparsely populated suburb. The house itself was grim, a squat brick structure standing alone in a yard that, as far as I could see through the gloom, had neither flowers nor grass. A few twisted trees groaned and bent in the storm, as if desperate to flee their desolate home and drift out to the open sea. A tower rose at one corner, a silent sentinel above the two-story main building, and a single window glowed faintly in the darkness. Even from the cab, something about the place made me shiver. A trickle of rain ran down my back as I hurried to the doorway, adding a chill to the sense of foreboding. He had written in response to my note, "Don't ring, open the door and come up." And so I did. The staircase inside was dimly lit by a single gas jet at the top of the second flight. Step by careful step, I made my way up, heart hammering, until I reached the landing. Through an open door, light spilled from the square room of the tower. There he was, Dampier, in his gown and slippers, moving forward to greet me. The warmth in his smile erased any thought that his unusual instructions might be inhospitable. The first glance alone confirmed that whatever mysteries this house held, I would find no cold welcome here. He was not the man I remembered. Though barely past middle age, his hair had turned gray, and a pronounced stoop bent his thin, angular frame. His face was a map of deep lines, his skin pale as if drained of life. And yet it was his eyes that unsettled me most, unnaturally large, burning with a strange, almost otherworldly fire. He guided me to a chair, offered a cigar and spoke with solemn sincerity of the pleasure it gave him to see me. We exchanged small talk, trivial words that barely grazed the surface, while all the time I was haunted by the enormity of his change. He must have sensed it, for suddenly he smiled, a sharp, bright curl of lips, and said, "You are disappointed in me, non sum qualis eram." I hesitated, unsure how to respond, then ventured, "Why, really, I don't know. Your Latin seems as precise as ever."
His smile deepened. "No," he replied, "it grows more fitting, as a dead language should. But wait, there may come a time when an even better tongue is required. Shall I send you a message in it?" The light in his eyes dimmed as he spoke, replaced by a solemn gravity that made my chest tighten. I refused to let the weight of his words control me, or to reveal how deeply the shadow of mortality had touched me. "I suspect," I said carefully, "it will be long before human speech fails to serve its purpose, and when that day comes, perhaps the need itself and all its possibilities will have vanished." He said nothing, and I too fell silent. Our conversation had drifted into a heavy, almost depressing mood, and I found no way to steer it toward lighter waters. Then, as if on cue, the storm paused. The sudden quiet was startling, a sharp contrast to the relentless roar outside. And then I heard it, a soft, deliberate tapping coming from the wall just behind my chair. It was not a knock for entry, but a gentle, measured signal, an unmistakable sign of someone in an adjoining room. Most of us, I suspect, have known such mysterious communications, though few care to speak of them. I glanced at Dampier. Perhaps there was a flicker of amusement in my eyes, though he seemed oblivious. His attention was fixed on the wall behind me, his expression impossible to describe, a haunting mix of awe and something darker. The memory of it remains vivid even now. The situation unnerved me. I rose to leave. Dampier's voice cut through my hesitation. "Please sit. It is nothing. No one is there." Yet the tapping continued, slow, gentle, insistent. "Forgive me," my voice tight. "It is late. May I come again tomorrow?" He offered a smile, but it felt forced, mechanical. "Your caution is admirable, but unnecessary. This is the only room in the tower, and no one is here. At least," he let the words hang, incomplete. Rising, he moved to the window, the sole opening in the wall from which the sound seemed to come, and threw it wide. "See," he said. Uncertain of what else to do, I followed him to the window and looked out. A lone street lamp, standing some distance away, cast just enough light through the renewed downpour to make one thing unmistakably clear. There was no one there. Nothing at all. Only the smooth, empty brick wall of the tower, slick with rain and utterly lifeless. Dampier closed the window, motioned for me to sit, and returned calmly to his chair. The moment itself was not especially mysterious. A dozen explanations might have existed, though none came to mind, and yet it lingered with me, unsettling in a way I could not explain. Perhaps it was his insistence on reassuring me, his careful effort to dismiss it, that gave the incident a strange weight. He had proven that no one was there, and somehow that was precisely what made it disturbing. He offered no explanation, no theory, no attempt to resolve it. His silence gnawed at me, stirring an irritation I could not suppress. "My dear friend," I said at last, my tone edged with irony,
I would never question your right to keep as many ghosts as suit your taste or your idea of companionship. That is entirely your affair. But I am a man of practical concerns, firmly rooted in this world. Spectres do nothing for my peace of mind. I think I shall return to my hotel, where the guests, at least, are still alive." It was not a gracious remark. Still, he showed no offense. "Please stay," he said quietly. "Your presence here matters to me. What you heard tonight, I believe I have heard twice before. Now I know it was real, not imagination. That knowledge is worth more to me than you can understand." He paused, then added gently, "Take another cigar, and bring with you a generous measure of patience. I owe you a story."
The rain had settled into a steady rhythm, a low, persistent whisper, broken occasionally by the sudden lash of tree branches as the wind surged and faltered. The night had grown deep, yet I remained rapt, held by equal measures of curiosity and a strange, almost involuntary sympathy for my friend. I did not utter a single word, letting him speak, letting the story unfold. 10 years ago, he began, I lived in a ground-floor apartment at the far end of town on Rincon Hill. Once the pride of San Francisco, the neighborhood had fallen into decay, its grand old houses now faded, neglected. Wealthy citizens had moved on, new streets and public works had shattered the harmony of the place, leaving a row of homes behind, each with its small garden, fenced by low iron barriers and bisected with gravel paths that ran with mathematical precision from gate to door. One morning, as I was stepping out of my home, I saw a young girl entering the neighboring garden to the left. It was June. The day was warm. She wore a gown of simple, delicate white, and from her shoulders hung a wide straw hat, lavishly adorned with ribbons and flowers in the fashion of the season. At first I noticed only her elegance, the effortless grace of her attire, but then my gaze caught her face, and all else became irrelevant. There was something about her presence that transcended the ordinary, that seemed almost otherworldly. I shall not attempt to describe it. No words could honor it. Her beauty was absolute, compelling, and unforgettable. Everything I had ever imagined or dreamed of beauty seemed to converge in that living masterpiece, a creation that could only have been painted by the hand of the divine. I was so deeply moved that without a single thought of propriety, I instinctively removed my hat, as a devout Catholic might before a sacred image, or a respectful Protestant before the vision of the Blessed Virgin. The girl gave no sign of displeasure. She merely lifted her dark, radiant eyes toward me, eyes so intense and luminous that I caught my breath, and, without a word, moved gracefully into the house. For a long moment I stood frozen, hat in hand, painfully aware of my breach of decorum, yet so utterly overwhelmed by the emotion that surged through me that my sense of shame was strangely muted. And then, almost reluctantly, I walked away, leaving my heart behind in that small sunlit garden. By the afternoon, however, I returned, feigning interest in the few unremarkable flowers I had never before noticed. My hope was in vain. She did not appear. A night of restless thought was followed by a day of expectation and disappointment. And then, the following day, as I wandered aimlessly through the quiet neighborhood, I saw her again. This time I exercised caution. I did not repeat my impulsive gesture of uncovering my head, nor did I dare to hold her gaze for more than a fleeting moment. Yet my heart pounded audibly, my hands trembled, and a flush crept across my face as her large, dark eyes met mine. There was recognition in her look, pure, clear, without flirtation or artifice,
but it was enough to make me acutely aware of the stirrings within me. "I will spare you the endless details," he said, his voice low and steady, "for I saw the girl many times after that day, yet never once did I speak to her, nor seek to draw her attention. I made no attempt to know her, to enter her world. Perhaps my restraint will seem puzzling. I was utterly, hopelessly in love, but habits of thought and the weight of upbringing are not so easily overcome. I was what some might call an aristocrat," he continued, a faint irony in his tone, "and despite her beauty, despite her charm and grace, she was not of my class. I knew her name, though it matters little, and something of her family. She was an orphan, living under the roof of a stubborn, overbearing elderly woman. My own income was modest, my talents unsuitable for marriage, perhaps a gift in disguise. To unite with her family would have condemned me to their ways, separated me from my books and studies, and, socially, reduced me to the ranks below. Such considerations may seem trivial, even absurd, but every instinct, every habit, every whisper of ancestral blood cried out against such a match." He paused, his gaze distant, as if weighing invisible scales. In brief, reason, temperament, and yes, even love itself stood opposed. I was and remain an irreclaimable sentimentalist, drawn to the ethereal, the impersonal, the spiritual beauty of a feeling unspoiled by familiarity. Marriage, acquaintance, the practicalities of life, they would have destroyed the delicate dream I cherished. "No woman," he said softly, almost to himself, "is ever quite what she appears to be. Love is a delicious illusion. Why should I wake myself from it?" "The path dictated by reason and sentiment was clear," he said, his voice tinged with both regret and wonder. "Honor, pride, prudence, the preservation of my ideals, all should have driven me away. But I was too weak. The only victory my will could achieve was to avoid meeting her, to keep from the garden, to step outside only when I knew she was away at her music lessons, returning only after nightfall. And yet, even in this careful avoidance, I lived as if in a trance, surrendering to the most enchanting imaginings, arranging every part of my intellectual life around the dream she inspired. My friend, if your actions have ever been governed by reason, you cannot know the paradise of folly in which I existed." "One evening," he continued, a shadow of mischief in his expression, "the devil whispered to me, and I acted as an utter fool. Through casual, seemingly harmless questions, I learned from my chatty landlady that her bedroom lay directly next to mine, divided by only a thin party wall. Compelled by some coarse, irresistible impulse, I tapped lightly on the wall. At first there was no reply, naturally, but I was beyond concern for propriety. Madness gripped me, and I tapped again. Again, silence. I had the decency to stop, yet only barely. An hour later, absorbed in my studies, I heard, or thought I heard, the faintest echo of my signal. Heart hammering, I flung aside my books and, as steadily as I could, rapped 3 deliberate, slow taps upon the wall. Then, astonishingly, the response came. 1, 2, 3. A perfect, deliberate repetition of my signal. That was all, but it was enough. Oh, far too much. The next evening, and for many evenings after, that foolish game continued, always with me having the last word. I was deliriously happy, yet stubbornly resolved not to see her. And then, as if punished for my obstinacy, the answers stopped coming. She must be offended, I told myself, offended by my hesitation, my failure to act, and so I resolved to seek her out, to make her acquaintance, and what would have come of it? I did not know then, nor do I know now. Days passed, each one a fruitless quest. I haunted the streets where we had first met, yet she remained invisible, silent. From my window I watched her garden, but she neither entered nor left. I sank into a deep, restless dejection, convinced she had gone, yet I could not bring myself to ask my landlady for confirmation, especially after that woman had once spoken of the girl with a casualness that had offended me profoundly. Then came a night that would mark me forever. Worn out by emotion, indecision, and despair, I had retired early and fallen into the fitful sleep that I could summon. In the dead of night, some unseen malign force stirred me awake. My eyes flew open. I sat upright, listening with every nerve taut, knowing not what I sought. And then I thought I heard the faintest tapping on the wall, the mere ghost of that familiar signal. 1, 2, 3. No louder than before, but striking my senses with a precision that left me breathless. I was about to answer, when, with incredible folly, the adversary of all reason whispered in my ear, "She has ignored me long enough. Now I shall ignore her." May God forgive my stupidity. The rest of that night I lay awake, fortifying my obstinacy with shameless justifications, every nerve alert, every thought fixed, and listening, always listening.
Late the next morning, as I stepped out of the house, I encountered my landlady entering the building. "Good morning, Mr. Dampier," she said brightly. "Have you heard the news?" I replied with words that I had heard nothing, and a manner that made it clear I had no desire to hear any. My attitude seemed to escape her entirely. "About the sick young lady next door," she continued, chattering on. "What, you didn't know? She's been ill for weeks, and now—" I could hardly contain myself. "And now?" I demanded, voice sharp with dread. "She is dead." But that was not the full story. Later, I learned that in the dead of night, as she emerged briefly from a week-long delirium, the young woman made a final request that her bed be moved to the opposite side of the room. Those caring for her thought it a whim of fevered fancy, yet they complied. And so, in her last moments, her failing strength reached out, restoring a fragile golden thread of sentiment, an invisible bridge between her pure, innocent spirit and a world of brutal, self-serving lawlessness. What reparation could I offer? Are there prayers or masses for souls adrift on nights like this, spirits tossed about by invisible winds, wandering through storms and darkness, leaving behind only signs, hints of memory, and ominous presages of doom? "This is the third visitation," he said quietly, his eyes dark with resignation. "The first time I was too skeptical to do more than verify the event by natural means. The second, I responded to the signal after it had repeated several times, but to no effect. Tonight, the recurrence completes what Parapelius Necromantius calls the fatal triad. There is nothing more to tell." When Dampier finished, I found no words that could add meaning, no questions that would seem grotesque or intrusive. I rose, bidding him good night, my gesture carrying the weight of sympathy I could not put into speech. He acknowledged it silently, pressing my hand with a gravity that spoke of unutterable sorrow. That night, alone with his grief, his regrets, and the shadow of the unknown, Moan Dampier passed beyond the reach of the living world. The storm outside had quieted, yet the echo of his life, its beauty,
Its obsession, its haunting mysteries, lingered like a whisper, a subtle warning of the thin veil between this world and the next.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.